You've made a typo, right? Of course you have. We all do. But what if that spelling mistake wasn't a mistake at all? What if it was a secret message? A clue, perfectly preserved for 2,000 years, just waiting for us to crack the code. All right, let's get into this. This is a real linguistic cold case. So think of this as a detective story. Seriously, we're on the hunt for something that's been lost to time. A voice, an ancient accent. And you know what our only clues are? A bunch of what everyone for centuries just wrote off as simple spelling mistakes. Okay, let's set the scene. We're heading back in time, way back, to Roman Egypt around the 2nd century CE. Now, this place was a real melting pot. It was a totally bilingual society. The language of the government, all the official stuff, that was Greek. But the language of the people, what they actually spoke at home, well, that was Egyptian. You've got these two major languages, two cultures, all living and working right next to each other. And where do our clues come from? You might think we'd be looking at some grand monument or a royal scroll, but nope. Our evidence comes from the ancient world's version of a sticky note or scrap paper. We're talking about ostraka, basically just broken shards of pottery. And who was writing on them? Young Egyptian apprentices, kids who were learning to become scribes. They were practicing their Greek because, Greek was the language of business, of government. It was their ticket to a better life. So here's where it gets interesting. The Greek these students were writing, it was just full of what looked like spelling errors. For ages, historians just shrugged and said, well, they're students, right? Students make mistakes. It makes sense. But what if it's something way cooler than that? What if they weren't spelling words wrong at all? What if they were spelling them phonetically? Spelling them exactly the way they sounded to an Egyptian ear. To crack this case, we have to change our whole perspective. We need to stop looking at these as errors and start seeing them for what they really are. Phonetic clues. They're like vocal fingerprints left behind by a spoken accent and preserved in clay for thousands of years. Okay, let's get specific. Take the Greek word for wheat, which is pyroa. Now that Y in the middle makes a sort of oo sound. But our scribes, they almost always spelled it paroa. They swapped that Y sound for an O, which makes a clear oo sound, kind of like the oo in food. And get this, it wasn't a one-off mistake. They did this consistently. This is a pattern, and patterns are what detectives look for. This whole pattern thing, it points to a really fascinating idea in linguistics called phonological transfer. Sounds complicated, but it's not. All it means is that the sounds of your native language create a kind of filter in your brain. So when you learn a new language, you hear and try to make its new sounds through the filter of your old, familiar sounds. It's like your brain's audio settings are still stuck on language number 1. To really get what this means, check out this amazing modern-day example. This is a real text message written in English by someone whose first language is Egyptian Arabic. Just try to read it out loud for a second. You can practically hear the accent right off the page, can't you? See, the person who wrote this isn't bad at English at all. They're just writing it how they hear it, phonetically. And notice the pattern here because it's super important. The consonants, they're pretty much all there, right? Bolkon, Stalit, Thumzing, he nails the consonants. But the vowels, they're all over the place. He's just swapping in the vowel sounds that make the most sense to his Arabic-speaking brain. And this is exactly what we think was happening with our scribes 2,000 years ago. Okay, so our number one suspect for causing this accent is, you guessed it, the scribe's native language, ancient Egyptian. And when you put it side by side with Greek, you realize these two languages were just built differently. I mean, fundamentally different. First off, let's talk about rhythm. Greek was what we call moritimed, which just means every single syllable gets its moment in the sun. The vowel sounds are all clear and distinct. But Egyptian, it was stress-timed, just like English or Arabic. Think about how we talk. We rush through unstressed syllables, and their vowels get all weak and mushy, turning into a kind of sound. On top of that, in Egyptian, the consonants were the real superstars. They carried the basic meaning of a word. Vowels were more like the backup singers, just there to hold things together. So here's the bottom line. If you were an Egyptian speaker, your brain was literally wired to pay close attention to consonants and kind of ignore the unstressed vowels. But that's a huge problem when you're speaking Greek, because in Greek, that little vowel at the end of a word is often absolutely critical. It can tell you if something is singular or plural, or if it's the subject or object of a sentence. So when our Egyptian scribe tried to speak Greek, their instincts would tell them to just swallow those unstressed vowels, which would have made their Greek really hard to understand. All right, so the theory feels really solid, right? The mistakes the scribes made line up perfectly with how an Egyptian speaker would pronounce things. But how do we prove it? I mean, this is the big question. How can we be 100% sure this is an Egyptian accent and not just, Greek evolving and changing on its own, which languages do all the time? And that is the ultimate challenge for anyone studying ancient languages. It's not like we can just hop in a time machine and go interview these scribes. We need some kind of linguistic time machine, a way to actually hear what spoken Egyptian from that time sounded like.
Well, believe it or not, that time machine actually exists, and it's called Coptic. Coptic is basically the final evolution of the ancient Egyptian language. And here's the game changer. It was written using the Greek alphabet. Think about that. For the first time ever, the Egyptians wrote their own language down with vowels, creating what is essentially a perfect phonetic map of how their language was actually spoken.
The Coptic writers were smart. They took the Greek alphabet, and for the few Egyptian sounds that Greek didn't have a letter for, they just borrowed some extra characters from their old Demotic script. This new alphabet they created, it's our Rosetta Stone, but not for translation. It's a Rosetta Stone for sound. So how exactly does Coptic crack the case for us? Well, the method is actually pretty elegant and simple. Step 1, you find all the consistent spelling errors in the Greek text from our scribes. Step 2, you look at Coptic texts and see how they spelled Greek words that they borrowed into their language. Now, if our whole theory is correct, the patterns in both sets of writing, the mistakes from the scribes and the loanwords in Coptic, should be a perfect match. And there it is, the smoking gun. Remember that Greek Y sound that the scribes kept spelling as a U? Well, guess what? Coptic speakers did the exact same thing when they adopted Greek words. And that whole business with confusing and dropping the weak unstressed vowels, it matches perfectly with how Coptic handled those sounds. It's not just close, it's a one-to-one match. Case closed. So yeah, the evidence is just overwhelming. What we've been listening to this whole time, baked into these clay shards, it's not a series of mistakes, it's a voice. The final verdict is in. These aren't typos, they're echoes, the written echoes of a real, living, breathing accent. A specific dialect we can now call Egyptian Greek that was spoken in the streets and temples of Roman Egypt. And it was all captured by a bunch of students who were just doing their homework, just writing down what they heard. And this isn't some weird ancient thing that doesn't happen anymore. It's happening all around us right now. Think about it. We have Indian English, we have Singaporean English, Irish English, all these beautiful varieties that have their own unique rhythm and sounds, all shaped by the native languages of the people speaking them. Well, the ancient world was no different. They had their own regional flavors of Greek too. So, what are the big takeaways here? First, that a simple spelling mistake can be so much more. It can be a treasure map leading to a lost sound. Second, it's a powerful reminder that the ancient world wasn't some uniform, monolithic place. It was noisy and vibrant and full of different accents, just like our world today. And maybe the biggest lesson of all is that sometimes the best kind of archaeology doesn't involve a shovel and a brush. It involves listening really, really closely to the echoes of the human voice. And of course, this kind of incredible linguistic detective work doesn't just happen. It's the result of painstaking research by scholars like Dr. Sonja Dahlgren. Her work really laid the foundation for all of this. It's a great reminder that behind these big discoveries, there's always a real person, someone driven by a deep curiosity and just a powerful need to connect with the people of the past. And all of this leaves us with one last really exciting thought. Hiding in plain sight, in all the little typos and grammatical goofs in ancient texts from all over the globe. Just think, what other lost voices are out there, just waiting for someone to finally listen?